My name is Owen Dalton. I'm from Dublin, but we're down in the Beara Peninsula near a village called Irees in West Cork. So I have a business conserving and restoring sculpture all around Ireland, and it allows me to focus on what I'm really passionate about now, which is nature and seeing nature, wild nature, return. I moved down here with my family in 2009 and we bought a farm here of 73 acres. What attracted me to the place was the fact that for probably around 100 years the farm was disused. So in that time a lot of the land, most of the land, went back to wild nature of native forest, and as I subsequently discovered, actually rainforest, temperate rainforest. What gave that away was the presence of what are called epiphytes. Epiphytes, because they're not rooted in the ground, they require high levels of moisture in the air, whether it's rain, drizzle, fog, mist. So wherever you find epiphytes in a forest, you know that you're in a rainforest. Even though it was extremely beautiful and biologically rich, it was also ecologically wrecked when I arrived, and there were a couple of main reasons for that, but the biggest one was very severe overgrazing by, in this case, feral goats and sika deer. The fact that there was absolutely no woodland ground floor in the forest at all. There was only mosses and a couple of other ferns and other plants. So generally it's estimated that in prehistory, before human impacts, natural forest covered somewhere around 80% of this island. It's now down to around 1%, and of that 1%, pretty much all of it is completely and utterly trashed by overgrazing, by artificially high numbers of deer or other grazers. After about a year and a half, the native woodland scheme was approved, and a goat and deer exclusion fence was erected around most of the forest. And together with the removal of rhododendron and other invasive species, there was the most incredible transformation of the whole place. The whole place just started to absolutely come to life with an eruption of wildflowers all over the woodland floor, which increased the number of insects and bird life, and the whole place just started to ring and buzz with life. It was the most amazing transformation. Deer are a natural part of ecosystems. The problem is that we have completely eliminated the counterweight to that, which is predation by larger predators. There were two main categories of the farm that we bought here. There was land that's not shared with anybody, it's just our place, and then there's commonage. And commonage is ground that you share with some of your neighbours. So really what I'm doing is concentrated on the non-commonage part of the farm. And that area is where you have the concentration of densest rainforest in my place. And I consider what I'm doing there to be rewilding, because there is no real extractive processes involved in what I'm doing there. It's just the land is purely left for nature. There's another 8.5 acres, and that area I have Dexter cattle, which are small quote-unquote native breed of cattle, and they spend most of the year on the mountain commonage, but I bring them in here in the winter when the leaves are off the trees, and that way they don't interrupt or impede that process of natural regeneration of wild native forest in this area. Consider that to be high nature value farming. I think it's essential to underline the fact that it only works because they have mountain commonage where they can spend most of the year, and that area, the mountain commonage, is ecologically wrecked. So it's kind of like a sacrifice area that allows this, if that makes sense. I think something that's a point that's very often overlooked is that when we talk about nature, we tend to think in terms of favoured species, like species that are more easy for us to relate to, whether it's certain birds or butterflies or mammals. But we really need to start thinking in other terms, which is in ecosystem terms. It's essential to understand that an ecosystem is thousands of species and the connections between those species. We either act now or it's going to be too late. We need to start acting on the climate, and we need to start acting to stop destroying nature and to start letting it come back on a massive scale, or it's going to have catastrophic implications for all of us and for the rest of life on Earth.
My name is Caroline Stanley, and I'm with a group called Friends of Merlin Woods, and I'm also involved in the Ard Gardening Group, and we're sitting here in the community garden on the edge of Merlin Park Woods. Merlin Park Woods then is like one of the largest, oldest urban woodlands within Galway City, and probably the most biodiverse. At the time when we started, we're 10-year anniversary coming up in October. It started because of litter. We're surrounded by housing, we're all the way around the woods, and there was an awful litter problem. Many people weren't using the woodlands, and if you looked to see what Merlin Park Woods was in those days on the internet, all you would have got was a dirty, murky woods. That was the description you could find. At the beginning, when we did the litter picks, we got an awful lot of people interested in cleaning the place up and using the woodlands, and with that we then heard about the threat of a road going through it. So that's when we started looking at biodiversity and learning about it, because really we didn't know a whole lot. We started running Biodiversity Week, Heritage Week, all of that stuff to build up our own knowledge, to get the experts in and to listen to what the experts were saying to us, and then to try and back that up with evidence, you know, through photography or surveying or whatever we needed really to show the diversity of the woodlands. Well, it's just an incredible place. We have red squirrels, we have foxes, we have evidence of badgers, we have over 50 different species of birds here. We have 20 different species of butterfly, you know, so that's over 2/3 of the butterfly species of Ireland are here in Merlin Woods. We have dragonflies, we have 8-9 different types of dragonflies that come here. And we also have many different species of bees. We've had projects that lead out of that, so we've had Nature for Health programs working with Healthy Galway. We're working with Mental Health Ireland now on walks on nature. You know, working with groups say like Galway Traveller Movement, it's to remind them that their past is also in the woodlands. Not only, you know, are we going through a biodiversity loss, but we're losing the space for people as well. So we're trying to find this balance within the community, within an urban woodland, for people and for wildlife. So we had to fight then, you know, we'd go into, you know, I would join the community network, and then you'd be a representation for the PPNs, the SPCs, social policy groups, and then you'd be pushing for policy to make sure there was staff for woodlands. So in those 10 years we've managed to get 3 staff for all of the woodlands in Galway. But now what's happening is when staff retire, or, you know, people go out sick, these staff then are pulled from the woodlands again, so we still don't have those staff. You know, they should be 3 dedicated staff for the woodland, but they're not. So biodiversity is always loses out. They just don't seem to get how important this place is, and they're not recognising it for that importance. If we were a business, we might get more recognition. Do you know what I mean? We're a community group. And I think that's the problem, and that's why we have biodiversity loss. And, you know, we're coming into the 3rd time we've had to protect this woodlands from development. There's a proposal to put a road through it again on the South Meadows and the South Woodlands in 10 years. And the South Meadows is like one of the most amazing orchid-rich meadowlands. There's over 60 different species of wildlife, flowers, grasses on it. And that also brings in all the butterflies, the dragonflies, the birds, you know, all of that. It's a complete amazing place. But what they fail to see is that the woodlands and all its habitats, its grassy verges, its meadowlands, its broadleaf, its conifers, all of that together is what keeps it so biodiverse. Is at national level, they're saying, well, you can have all this, but when it gets down to the council levels, the funding isn't there. So we're not getting the staff for any of these massive projects related to climate change, biodiversity. It's just not translating down here. If you can protect the places that exist already, then we're at nothing, because this is where all the biodiversity comes from. It's very cheap to leave wildlife alone and to let it flourish.
So my name's Andrea Francis, go by Andy, and this is the townsland of Rossfinch, Ballynahinch. So we're just off the M7 and we're where the counties of Clare, Tipperary and Limerick meet. We decided to split 50% of the land for traditional farming, which was suckler beef, and 50% of the lesser quality land into forestry to diversify incomes and also to kind of face the reality that we need to be supporting things like biodiversity and climate change, and the incentives are starting to turn that way with the Department of Agriculture. So we both work full-time in other jobs outside of the farm simply because the farm was not generating a livable income, even though it was 110 acres. And it did not make sense to put that many hours of work in for no actual returns. With the new Common Agricultural Policy coming in 2023, definitely going to be involving more to do with biodiversity and climate change. 15% of everything we planted is native woodland, and 15% of 39,000 trees. That's a nice portion of native woodland as well. There's definitely a place for timber production in Ireland, because as long as we're importing it, we're actually making things worse. Transporting wood from mainland Europe, from Scotland into Ireland when we could actually produce it ourselves is just far more pragmatic. There's never going to be a time when we don't need timber to build buildings, to create furniture, to create pencils. As simple as it is, finances are incredibly important when you have a choice to make with the land you own. I mean, and ultimately the farmer gets to make the choice. It's not that the land is a public resource. These are all privately owned. There's 130,000 small farms of 80 to 100 acres. I'm just one of that massive group that you give the majority of the grant, which you get from the government for the first 15 years, to the forestry contractor, and you take a small portion of that, and then when year 15 comes, you'll have what's called the first thinning, which is where you decide how many of the trees need to be removed, which are then sold as timber, but basically to enable the rest to grow to its fullest capacity, because space is required, which is the 30 year, and that's the end of a rotation for the Sitka spruce, in which case you do clear fell, you sell it for whatever's the going rate in the market, and you plant again. The reason to not go full native woodland is the practicalities that a spruce delivers. It's fast growing, it sequesters carbon quicker. There's going to be demand in our growing population for timber. We will have provided a certain volume of timber to the market that is needed for our growing population and our requirement for housing. And then we will have a choice to replant a full native woodland, which is where I hope we can go. I had so much fear after the recession, and I had to go abroad for almost 8 years before I could come back home to work. The idea of giving up a chance to have a second stream of income from a farm It's very hard to say no to that. You don't know what life's going to throw at you. I don't know if I'll still have this career in 10 years. I've grown up with lots of instability. My parents grew up on a knife edge with their finance, setting up their farm. If you had a chance to make 10,000 euros a year to support your life, would you turn it down? It's hard to say no. It's almost like forestry means you're giving up. You're taking the easy road out. You're not doing the hard graft the generations before you did to create good grassland and have cattle and livestock and so on. But even the last 30 or 40 years of the Common Agricultural Policy was all about incentivizing having livestock on your land. It's not by accident we ended up with lots of fields, grazed down to the bare minimum and hedgerows cut back to the bare minimum. It's because it was incentivized. If your mindset is looking at your land parcel, your 80 or 100 or 50 acres, whatever it may be, and you see it just on its own, isolated from the ecosystem around it, how do you change the conversation to look at the whole of our land, not my bit?